Hi everybody! Today I'm going to talk about the relationship between sense of belonging and student outcomes in CS1 and beyond. So sense of belonging has been shown to be connected to multiple outcomes for college students, including retention, academic standing, and self-worth. Research in computing has been less conclusive than in other STEM fields, and results have varied. A more recent study was conducted by Sachs et al. In 2018, which was a multi-institutional study on sense of belonging. This study looked at student sense of belonging in introductory computing courses across 15 institutions in the US. In terms of research questions, Sachs et al. Looked at students' incoming sense of belonging by gender and by race and ethnicity, looked at change in sense of belonging by the same demographics, and looked at predicting sense of belonging. In terms of the first research question, Sachs found that women have a lower incoming sense of belonging than men, and surprisingly, underrepresented groups have a higher incoming sense of belonging than non-underrepresented groups. In terms of change in sense of belonging, they found that sense of belonging declines for women from the beginning to an end of the course, and found no significant change for the other groups. In terms of predicting sense of belonging, they found prior programming experience to be a predictor, as well as gender, communal orientation, and several other factors. Now, one thing to note is that the results for underrepresented groups have not always replicated. Some have found underrepresented groups to come in with a lower incoming sense of belonging, and that this was in introductory computing courses, as have most studies on sense of belonging been in computing, in introductory courses only. So this begs the question, will these results replicate, especially in other courses in computing as well? So we decided to conduct a replication and extension of Sachs' work to hopefully provide a new context and provide an opportunity to put computing education research on firmer experimental grounds. So our first two research questions are the same as Sachs. What do students report as their incoming sense of belonging, and does this vary by demographic? And does sense of belonging change over time, and does this vary by demographic? Our third research question is different. It is, does sense of belonging correlate with student outcomes? So Sachs looked at predicting sense of belonging, whereas ours is looking at how sense of belonging is correlated with student outcomes, including course pass rates, rates of retention across quarters, overall course grades, and final exam scores. So what makes our study different? We looked at 6 lower division courses. So at our institution, we have a 2-course introductory course sequence for students without prior programming experience, and an accelerated version that is a 1-course sequence for students with prior experience. These lead into a basic data structures course, followed by a computer organization course and an advanced data structures course. So these are the 6 courses that we looked at for sense of belonging, and we looked at these across 3 quarters. So for our first 2 research questions on incoming sense of belonging and change in sense of belonging, we looked at data for fall 2019, winter 2020, and spring 2020. For our third research question on student outcomes, we had similar data, but it's important to note that the COVID pandemic impacted the end of winter 2020 and all of spring. So our winter 2020 final exams were remote, as well as all of spring quarter. So the course grades and final exam scores were not representative of a typical quarter at our university. Therefore, we chose to only look at fall 2019 when looking at sense of belonging and its correlation with student outcomes. In terms of data collection, we looked at overall course grade, final exam scores, and demographic information, which was provided to us as a binary value from our university. So for gender, we had access to whether students were women or men. In terms of demographics, for race and ethnicity, we had BLMPI and non-BLMPI. So BLMPI is for us our underrepresented groups, but it is specific to Black, late Latinx, Native American, and Pacific Islander students. Additionally, we looked at first-generation students. A first-generation student is someone who is the first in their family to attend college. And we looked at transfer students, which are students that have transferred to our university from another university in college. So Sachs looked at gender and race and ethnicity, and we have added first generation and transfer status as other demographics to look at. We also have our sense of belonging, which comes from surveys that were given to students throughout the quarter. We use the first survey as a proxy for students' incoming sense of belonging, and the last survey, which was given in the last 2 weeks, as a proxy for students' outgoing sense of belonging at the end of the course. So how did we determine what sense of belonging was? On the survey, there was a question that asked, reflecting on your experiences over the past week, to what extent do you agree with the following statements? I feel accepted in this class, I feel comfortable in this class, I feel supported in this class, and I feel like I don't belong in this class. Now, ours are at the class level, whereas Sachs's sense of belonging was for computing in general. In terms of a scale, students were asked to rate on a scale of 1, not at all, to 5, completely. So how do we actually create a score from this? So assuming a student rated the different items with these ratings, we would then give them a score by looking at the different ratings. For the final one, I don't feel like I belong in this class, it is actually reverse coded. If you look at the statement, it is kind of an opposite compared to something such as I feel accepted in this class. So these items are then added up to create a sense of belonging score. Now, in terms of our replication of Sachs for the first 2 research questions, here you can see the different results for Sachs. And now we're going to look at our results. So Sachs found that women have a lower incoming sense of belonging than men. We also found this to be true. In terms of incoming sense of belonging for 3L and PI, we did not find them to have a higher incoming sense of belonging. We found it to be the same as for non-BL and PI students in terms of significance across the 6 courses. In terms of change in sense of belonging, we did not find a decline for women across the quarter, and we did not find a decline for BL and PI students. So in terms of our results, we were able to replicate the results for women, but not for BL and PI students. We did not see a decline in sense of belonging for women, and we also did not see a decline for anybody else, which that aspect is similar to Sachs at all. And as an extension, we also looked at transfer students and first-generation students, where we found that they also had a lower incoming sense of belonging compared to their counterparts, where this was most significant for women and first-generation students. Now moving on to our 3rd research question of sense of belonging and student outcomes. Here, we found belonging to be correlated with pass rates in introductory courses. So we consider passing to be receiving a course grade of a C- or higher, and we use logistic regression with a Hom-Bonverioni adjusted p-values. So here's a table where the columns are the different courses and the row is the correlation coefficient. So, or the coefficient, sorry. So here you can see that for CS1 and CS1.5, our 2-course introductory sequence, the results were statistically significant for passing the course in terms of the relationship between sense of belonging and passing the course. So to give you a better visualization of this, here are 2 graphs, one for CS1 and one for CS1.5, where the x-axis is the mean and median broken down by pass and not pass, and the y-axis is sense of belonging score. So this shows you a more visual way of looking at the difference in sense of belonging scores between students that did and did not pass the course. Next, we look at sense of belonging and its tie to academic outcomes. Here we found the relationship to be strongest in introductory CS courses and that it weakens in more advanced courses. We used Spearman correlations for this, so looking at overall course grade, you can see that the correlations seem to decrease throughout the curriculum. So as students get further into the curriculum, sense of belonging seems to be less tied to overall course grade. Then looking at final exam scores, we see a similar trend, though interestingly here, the only results that were statistically significant were for the first course in computing a student takes at our university. So one thing to note in terms of why we might not see a statistical significance here for the other options is other courses. It could be that it's related to the smaller effect size, so we would need a larger N to actually see anything. In terms of why there's a difference between overall course grade and final exam scores, it might just be because these are different types of assessment. Final exams have an advantage of measuring individual work, but they are a limited type of assessment. So what have we shown you? So we expanded Sachs' study by using 6 courses, including 2 demographics, and looking at student outcomes. We were able to replicate some of the results, and we also extended the work. So we found that sense of belonging is correlated with pass rates, final exam scores, and course grades, but less correlated with performance over time. So what do we want to do next? For future work, we should replicate our study across more universities and more courses, and focus more on sense of belonging for women and first-generation students. So thank you for watching this talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Please look at the paper.